All right, here is our video lecture on the Reformed Worldview and social work. Um, this this video, this whole lesson is just a lot of content intended to help you kind of make the connections between kind of this Reformed worldview that we adhere to at Kuiper and we talk a lot about in all of our classes. I am no theologian, but honestly, the simplicity and how perfect the Reformed worldview does fit into kind of what social work is always kind of amazes me. I'm very thankful that Kuiper has a social work program because it does align very, very well with the Reformed worldview. I know sometimes social work does get, I don't want to say a bad rap, but the label of being kind of a secular profession, very progressive, liberal, and not necessarily some people will say like not very Christian in how it allows people to make poor decisions and have self-determination. But when you really look at the root of what social work is, it is a very biblical profession. And I'm hoping with this lecture, it'll all kind of make sense. So all this content will be on the week 7 quiz, and hopefully you enjoy. So our objective today is really to understand the correlation between the Reformed worldview and social work, and then just kind of reflect on how our faith influences decisions in social work. That's going to be applied in some of the other application activities, but kind of it's the overall theme of today. All right, so you watched the video, hopefully the YouTube video on Abraham Kuiper. Obviously our college is named after him, but who is he really? Here's kind of the down and dirty of him. Some of this will be repeated from the video, but the video has way better graphics than this. So Abraham Kuiper was a Dutch statesman. He also was a theologian, a journalist, and he lived from 1837 to 1920. He was a pretty significant Dutch figure in politics and society during that time. And his influence wasn't just in one sphere. He kind of got his fingers into a lot of different pots in the Dutch society. So one of the things that he did was he founded a political party called the Anti-Revolutionary Party, which was one of the first modern political parties in the Netherlands. And one of his big things, I'm sure you've heard this in your theology classes, that God is sovereign over all. And so he didn't think God was just meant to be in the four walls of a church. He really leaned into the idea that God, in his perfect order and during creation, became invested in as part of all parts of the world, whether they are traditionally defined as religious or secular. God is sovereign over all of them. He was a writer, an editor. So there you go. He was an advocate, little social work role. He wrote in newspapers, magazines. He used them as platforms to promote his ideas. And he focused on influencing society in his writings, political activism, and educational initiatives. He believed in the power of ideas to shape culture and society, and he worked to promote his vision of a Christian-inspired social order through these means. Few more. I thought there was a few more. Nope. So overall, I think the thing to think about with Kuiper is that he just wasn't some stodgy guy who was sitting in his office in a church and writing all of these ideas. He was really active on the ground in all aspects of society. So one of the things I read an article, and I will link it on Populi, talking about how does Abraham Kuiper align with social work values. And one of the things that kind of came out in there is that Kuiper operated from the perspective that no one was neutral. As much as we want to say that we come in with a blank slate or a non-judgmental stance, we all have our own biases that are embedded at the root of us. Some of them are unconscious. We don't know them. It's just part of who we are. Some of them are a little bit more conscious. But we can't come into any space being neutral because we all believe something, and we can't help but bring our beliefs into what we do. And because of that, I'm going to go back to this one. It's important to recognize those biases, that we have something driving us, and we have to be aware of those, because that's kind of why we do those values assessment at the beginning of this class, because we have to understand the why behind what we do and kind of what drives us to think and believe a certain way about people, situations, etc. Another thing that he said, in order to address any societal issues, Kuiper said that we need to have more architects and fewer physicians. So obviously he's not literally telling us that we all have to become architects and build buildings or and not go be doctors. He's not talking about the literal professions. So what on earth did he mean when he said we need more architects and fewer physicians? So really, what he is suggesting and saying is, often when we think about the role doctors play, traditionally it is kind of reactive medicine. We're putting band-aids on things. We're fixing a problem that already occurred. Oh, you're sick? Well, let me help you get better. Oh, you broke your arm. Let's put it in a cast. Oh, you need surgery to fix the problem. Let's do the surgery. So it's very reactive. And in order, which isn't necessarily bad. And I think if you think about that in a social work lens, reactive things are necessary. If a client has a psychotic break, we're going to treat the psychotic break in the moment. If a client loses their housing, we're going to help find emergency housing. Those things aren't bad, but if we really want to get to the root of the problems, we have to look at what he referred to as the rotting social structure. So thinking then back to the analogy of architects and physicians, architects are really designing the infrastructure. So if we want to build a strong building, we want a strong design. We don't want to necessarily be like, oh, let's build a house, and then when the roof falls on top of people, we'll fix it then. No, we want to get to the root of the problem and build from there. So a very preventative, that is the word I'm thinking of, a preventative approach to structuring society. So he was saying, rather than tinkering at the margins and bandaging the wounds, we need to get to the root of the social structure problems. And I really think that ideal right there aligns very well with social work, because that's a lot of what we do. If a client is having a psychotic break, yes, we might meet them in their emergency and need to treat the crisis at hand by admitting them to inpatient, getting them into services, but we're also looking to see, oh, maybe we need to start medication to keep them stable long term. Let's look at their support systems. Do they have a good support system? We're not just going to send them to the hospital, give them some meds, and send them on their merry way. But what other things are going on in their environment? So this whole concept is very much that person and environment mindset that we have in social work, is that we need to look at the root of the problems versus just treating the problems at hand. All right, so that kind of goes into one of the concepts that Kuiper has, which is God's sovereignty. So this is one of those tenets of Reformed theology. And the key concepts where we can see that God's sovereignty aligns with social work is obviously, I think, the Kuiper quote that gets thrown out all the time at Kuiper colleges, which is, there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry out mine. I always think about Finding Nemo when I hear that, with the seagulls going mine, 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 mine. But there's a visual for you, God calling out over the whole world, mine, 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 mine. So this is really showing that not one person, not one situation, not one circumstance is just too much for God, or too corrupted that God can't touch it or doesn't want to touch it. This invites us into all the spaces of humanity, all of the problems, all of perspectives, issues that people might be encountering. It's mandating that God has sovereignty over all, and he's inviting us into the space to be able to engage in it. So in the green box says, because God is sovereign over the entire creation, everything is God's and nothing is outside his authority and control. And not only is God sovereign over the world he created, he is committed to it, invested in nurturing everything is made. And I think that is the important one. He didn't just make the world and say, oh, this is great. And then the fall happened and he's like, peace out. I'm done. You guys sinned. I'll be back when you guys figure it out. No, he is very invested and committed to the world he created because of his sovereignty overall. And this kind of leads us into those concepts that we talk a lot about in theology classes. And this is where I think social work aligns so well with Kuyperian theology. Is he talks about creation, fall, redemption, and then I didn't add on here, I don't know why, also the restoration piece. So if you think about creation, that's the first stage. I don't know if stage is the right word. The first part of this is where God created everything. And he created it as a context for shalom. So hopefully prior to watching this, you watched the YouTube video on shalom, talking about kind of the depth of what shalom is. Shalom is more than just being at peace and having like kumbaya and this perfect conflict-free world. Shalom is actively engaging in practices that bring about that shalom. So that's really what God created the world to be, in a perfect order. But then in the fall, humans rebelled and interrupted the shalom. So this is where we introduce sin and brokenness and kind of those pieces of why social work exists. If we didn't have the fall, social work would not exist. Which I guess in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather not have our profession if that meant that the world didn't have the fall, but here we're at. We had the fall, we have social work. But that's really what happened, is humans rebelled and disrupted that shalom. And so God entered the world through Jesus to help restore shalom. So if you think about, that's kind of that redemption piece. And so when I think about social work in these four different pieces of Reformed theology, redemption is kind of where we're meeting the clients at. It's the opportunity for us to align with God in his redemptive journey to bring back the shalom. So that's where kind of that shalom as a verb pops in. We're really working to restore that peace, that perfect order. And that's on so many different levels. It's on the individual level by working with people who are experiencing acute crises. We're looking at kind of the macro. We're addressing brokenness in policies, in social welfare design, those types of things. All those pieces of the world fall under God's sovereign reign and need shalom restored. And so moving to the restoration piece, that's kind of the end goal with social work. We might not be able to change a whole entire world or eradicate poverty or eliminate a housing crisis, but every time we engage with an individual or a policy or some sort of social stance that helps move us towards that restoration piece, we are doing kingdom work. And I think for me, that has really helped me when I start to feel burned out. Because yes, I can't change every single social problem with the work that I do. But if I can bring a piece of restoration through the redemptive process to one individual, I'm doing kingdom work. Kind of talked about that, and the video talked about that, so I'm going to go past. Another piece is God saying it's all good. So society is God's creation and operates according to God's laws, or at least it should. That was the intent during creation. The fall obviously jacked that up. So each thing is simultaneously good, but also has been tainted by sin. So that kind of aligns with the social work code of ethics. They talked about everybody, like the human dignity and human worth. Every person has human dignity and worth. With Reformed theology, we believe that their dignity and worth becomes because God created everyone in their image. But that doesn't discount the fact that the fall happened and sin still occurs. So social entities, I'm in the white box now, do not operate only according to the whims of humans, but rather must adhere to God's designs. So this is kind of going back to the idea of during the creation, God created shalom in everything. He didn't just create humans. He also created this perfect world. So when our government or our social welfare policies or something about society is off and isn't meeting the needs of everybody, it's because it's not adhering to God's design. It's not because they're bad or horrible. It's because humans are misapplying or misunderstanding the way God wanted it to be. And so that kind of reinforces the fact that everything is created good and now it's not bad. It's just not operating because of human nature in the way God intended it to be. Another concept is salvation is not just you and me. So in the pink box, God is not content to just save souls. He wants to restore. And I do like that. Like, God isn't just like, hey, I want to make you better, and then you can come up to heaven with me. We're all kosher. No, he wants to restore and reclaim the world back to the order that he created it in. And again, that's where social work comes in. So God's salvation restores not just humans, but also the human and social arrangements and artifacts as well. He's looking to restore society. And so if you're thinking back to your theology classes, talking about like heaven is the here and now, like the idea is that when Jesus comes back, it's not because we're just going to peace out and go up to this magical shiny castle in the sky. We're looking at heaven on earth, and we're restoring the kingdom that's here and now already. And so God is looking again for us to be part of that restorative piece. So that kind of mirrors what I said in the white box, that settings we engage in are not just earthly things he will save us from. These are his creation, and he has not abandoned us or them. So we are now part of God's unfolding plan to reclaim and renew his creation by using humans to accomplish his purposes. We're not just random individuals whose puny efforts in social work are simply bandaging wounds that cannot be healed. We are part of that architectural piece. We are helping bring restoration and redemption to a very broken world that God himself is invested in. And I'm going to skip to the white box and read it because God's love and care for his creation runs so deep, more than we can ever imagine. He is so invested in what he made that he gave up his only son in order to redeem it all. He did not abandon the world because of human choice. He is still highly invested in restoration and bringing back the shalom. And that is the power of the biblical story. Its claim that it's, oh my word, I'm just going to read it verbatim. The power of the biblical story is its claim that it is everyone's story about everything. It's not just pieces of humanity, it's the whole world and whole creation and the whole order. So when social workers wade into the murky waters of human pain, brokenness, and conflict, we do not do this so objectively. So this is kind of going back to that one of the first slides when I talked about how Abraham Kuyper was kind of adamant that no one comes into situations as neutral. Because the very act of engaging with another hurting person already reveals our bias. We believe that people matter. So again, that is a huge foundational piece of social work in the code of ethics. You don't necessarily have to adhere to Reformed theology to believe that, but Reformed theology really emphasizes the why behind why we believe that everyone has human worth and dignity, because they're created in God's image. So social workers, unique among their professions, have a heightened sense of the all-important place of values to our practice. What we believe matters, and beliefs shape our practice. So I'm going to take a pause here because I have a little bit more content. I'm trying not to make this one so long that you want to fall asleep. But those are some key concepts. Hopefully it gives you something to mull over and kind of connect the dots between everything.